Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's episode in Focus. Less than 50 days remain to the G20 Summit in Seoul. It is gearing up to be an event of impressive scale as the most powerful leaders and their entourages, flanked by media from all over the globe, will gather in the thousands to discuss the creation of a new economic system. Korea will lead the way as the first non-G7 host of the G20 conference. Let's learn more from our experts about Korea's efforts to make this event a success after the newsreel.
With about 50 days to go before the G20 summit opens in Seoul on the 11th of November, the nation has been busy making final preparations for the meeting of the world's major economic powers. As the physical details of the major event, such as accommodation, security, and convenience services, are being finalized, more important plans are being drawn and negotiations being carried out on the agenda. The Basel Committee on Banking Supervision released its latest revision to the Basel Accords on the 12th of September. The strengthened guidelines for bank capital will be presented at the G20 summit along with other proposals such as the IMF reform to seek global cooperation and compliance in preventing another global financial crisis. Meanwhile, Korea has been holding a string of meetings between experts and policymakers from around the world to work out a consensus before the upcoming G20 summit. Final tweaks to the agenda will be made during the G20 Sherpa conference and the finance ministers' meeting coming up in October.
Welcome back. We have two experts in this studio to discuss the upcoming G20 summit. To my right is Professor Dong-hwi, the professor at the Institute of Foreign Affairs and National Security. Welcome to the program.
Nice to be here.
Yes. Yes. To my left is Dr. Song Won-gun, Director of Finance and Fiscal Policies at the Korea Economic Research Institute. It's good to see you again here.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Well, only less than 50 days remain to the G20 summit in Seoul. So we can say that Korea is in the final stage of preparations for the taste of our global leadership. So I want to discuss about the significance of G20 summit in the global economy. What kind of the significance does G20 summit has in the global economy?
Well, let me start with these remarks. I think the most important significance of a G20 summit in international economy is well expressed in the declaration of a Pittsburgh summit held last year. Mm-hmm. It says, from now on, G20 summit will be a premier economic forum for governance, global economic governance and management of international economic order. Mm-hmm. I think that's the most important expression which explains the significance of G20 summit. Meanwhile, economic crisis that has brought the importance to the G20 summit is kind of recovering to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. But I think the G20's importance, therefore, is still remaining because it will seek balanced growth in the international economy, and also it should carry the international financial regulation reform and international financial institution reforms. All those things means that G20 summit should convert itself from crisis management toward steering committee for international economic governance.
Yes.
Well, in that sense, I think G20 significance still remains and will get stronger.
I see. Well, let's talk about a study conducted by the Samsung Economic Research Institute. This was really interesting, a study. I think that according to this study, Korea will gain huge economic benefits by hosting the G20 summit in November. Could you elaborate more about this study, and what do you think about this opinion personally? Do you think that Korea will gain huge economic benefits by hosting a G20 summit in November?
Yeah, I agree with the opinion that Korea will gain a huge economic benefit from hosting the G20 summit. And Samsung Economic Research Institute, SERI's estimation is that the economic effects of hosting G20 summit would be from 21 trillion won up to 24 trillion and 600 billion won.
Wow, it's huge money,
yeah,
right?
it was huge. It will be huge, and the direct effect of G20 summit, including consumption expenditure of foreign participants and other economic values created by directly by hosting the summit, is estimated to be approximately 100 billion won.
Wow.
But the most economic benefits from hosting the G20 summit is the indirect effects, economic effects. The indirect effects will be the kind of advertisement effect for Korean companies in the world market, and the effect of export growth. And SARI's estimation is to be around 20 trillion won of export growth effects from hosting the G20 summit in Seoul.
The SARI stands for Samsung Economic Research Institute,
Yes,
isn't it? Well, there should be some political benefits,
Right.
certainly. Could you explain about
In
that?
addition to the very interesting point that Sari made as far as the economics is concerned, I think there is another aspect that is the beyond economics. In my opinion, this G20 summit in Seoul will open widely the window of opportunity for Korean diplomacy to get, let's say, broadening the horizon of 21st century Korea's diplomatic front. The reason is Korean diplomacy so far, up to now, has been a little bit confined by the very nature of division of Korean Peninsula. So it has shown great attention to the military sector. Secondly, it has paid a lot of attention to the Korean Peninsula. And in combination of these two reasons, we have to focus on maintaining good bilateral military relations with the United States. But G20 itself is a kind of non-military, non-bilateral, non-peninsula. Therefore, G20 will give us very valuable opportunity to broaden our diplomatic front into
Well, certainly,
newer stage.
Yes, certainly by hosting a G20 summit, Korea will be able to gain the economic and political benefits. Well, by the way, like the coin which has two sides, there are some critics about the G20 summit meeting itself. Some critics have said that G20 summit has been carrying on as isolated events without much influences in the global economy. So to make the G20 summit in Seoul a success, definitely we have to make every effort to develop the system into an institution, international institution for decision-making the procedure in the global economy. Do you think, is it possible for us to develop this meeting into an international institution, Professor Song?
Yes, I think so. But in order to make a G20 framework an institution for decision-making in the global economy, the various opinions and conflicts on important agendas should be resolved and agreed among nations in the Seoul summit. Then we could establish and implement the principles for stronger international cooperation in the areas of development and finance and trade. If the nations cannot agree on many important agendas, our G20 framework cannot be the kind of an institution for decision-making in the global economy.
I see. So certainly the consensus among member countries should be the stepping stone for the development of this the summit into an institution, I think.
May I add something about institutional innovations? As I told at the first moment that this G20 summit is very important in the sense that it will mark the watershed opportunity to move G20 summit from the crisis management to steering committee. It means we have to do some efforts to establish institutional aspects of our G20 summit. In that regards, I can think of a couple of things of importance. The first one is we have to think about the regular rotation of presidency. Up to now, it is kind of very irregular, or at least it has been following the model of G20 finance ministers meeting, but it should set its own rotation rule. Second one is there is no clear membership structure. G20 is not G20. 19 member countries plus EU.
Yes.
And strangely, Netherlands and Spain have participated all the previous summits. So it's G20 plus Alpha
I see.
up to now. So we have to make very clear membership structure. By doing that, we can make efficient rotational system itself.
I see.
And thirdly, we have to think about how can make representation of regional institutions, or how can we devise a very wise mechanism to invite related countries, depending upon the host country's wishes. So all these things should be dealt, or should be begun to be dealt in the upcoming summit. But in that sense, I think some kind of a vision group might be better to be established to study in a mid to longer term perspective as regards to the institutional innovations of G20.
Well, yes, I think that's a good point. Well, then let's move on to the some of the detailed agenda for this summit. Very recently, as far as I remember, it was last August, the International Monetary Fund announced the very significant reform of its lending programs. Actually, by establishing the new lending programs, it can contribute to establishment of the so-called the global financial safety net. Actually, this was suggested by the Korean government. So could you elaborate more about the how this new lending program will work and its significance?
Okay, one of the most important agendas in the Seoul Summit is the establishment of global financial safety net. Especially Korean government is focusing on this agenda and playing a leading role to raise this issue as a main agenda for G20 Seoul Summit. So the global financial safety net is the major Korean initiative, we could say that, but many people have been kind of skeptical or had concerns on whether the G20 summit will bring about any meaningful agreements for establishing global financial safety net. But as you said, IMF announced the new program. It was called Flexible Credit Line, and established a backup program called the Precautionary Credit Line. This announcement is taken as a sign to erase doubt in the G20 summit. The content is that currently many emerging economies such as China, India, and Korea are accumulating enormous amount of foreign exchange reserves. So they can use those reserves in case of economic crisis. So it created many problems. For example, global imbalances, trade global imbalances, and other conflicts on exchange rate problem. As you know, that Chinese yuan problem. So with this new program, Flexible Credit Line, IMF will expand and enhance the flexible credit line. That means that the duration under the new system, the duration of flexible credit line is doubled to 1 year.
Doubled in 1 year?
1 year. It was 6 months, and it gives countries unlimited access to the fund. So the revised FCR will reduce the needs for emerging countries. They don't need to have too much foreign reserves, since the IMF guarantees to lend them hundreds of $billions when necessary. So the significance of this new system lies in the change of the role of IMF, because IMF is gradually shifting from the role of post-crisis bailout funds to the role of pre-crisis. kind of a prevention insurance fund.
I see. Well, yes, we discussed quite technical things. However, I would like to raise one more question to Dr. Song. Actually, very recently, the Basel Committee of the global regulators also announced a new set of the guidelines for the bank capital. Well, actually, the detailed requirements will be presented at the G20 Summit in November. But I want to know the importance of the capital regulations in the global economy. Certainly, by regulating capital flow, there will be a huge impact on the global economy, isn't it?
Yeah, right. In 2008, when global financial crisis broke out, at first it was a kind of a problem of investment banks because, as you know, investment banks were heavily dependent on debt and risky assets. So this is a kind of an investment banks problem, and then we could regulate the investment banks and to avoid the financial crisis. But also the commercial banks suffered fatally. And then huge bailout funds from taxpayers' money were pumped into the commercial banks. So the fact that the commercial banks were not safe was the main reason why the lending almost stopped and international financial system was not working for a while. So that's why we need to regulate the commercial banks also. So commercial banks needs to hold kind of a capital to be a buffer to the kind of a crisis of prime mortgage crisis.
So certainly the private, commercial banks should take some responsibility in the achieving the safe international economy system.
Economy and financial system.
Yeah, financial system, I think. Well, actually, I would like to ask a question to Professor Lee. Well, the Korea will be the first non-G7 the nation which hold the G20 summit by holding the G20 summit in the coming November.
Right.
To successfully hold this summit in November, I think that the Korea should have to make every effort. But could you explain the significance of the G20 summit in Seoul? This summit will be different from the previous ones?
Well, let me detour a little bit to explain it in full length. I think the most important point for the G20 summit in the economic field is how to make strong, sustainable, and balanced growth framework. The main focus of this issue is how to cure global imbalance. In that sense, I think a global financial safety net as a kind of, to avoid self-assuring kind of too much accumulation of surplus that causes the imbalances. That in security terms, it's a kind of related with the negative security. That means avoid the war itself. But on the other hand, we are focusing or we are introducing the concept of growth-oriented development in this upcoming summit. That means to make developing countries' growth potentials to the full, therefore create the effective demands, additional effective demands. Therefore, it will help the economic recovery of the world. That in security terms is a positive security that is seeking for positively peace structures and peace conditions. So these two issues are very important. In that sense, Korea has succeeded to introduce these two additional items in addition to the existing agendas. That means growth-oriented development and the global financial safety net, new items to the Seoul Summit. So Seoul Summit to be successful, we have to solve existing issues such as how to make sustainable, strong, and balanced growth, and how to make international financial regulations reform and institutions reform. In addition to that, we have to make progress in newly focused agenda, such as global financial safety net and also the growth-oriented development. And Coming back to your previous question, the raised question, Korea is quite different from the previous summit holders. Korea is first known
G7
nation, and also except Japan. In that sense, Korea is the first non-Catholic, non-Christian country. And thirdly, Korea is the first Asia-Pacific country which holds the G20 summit. So in that sense, Korea can do something. And especially when we think about Korea's qualification, such as first, Korea has moved from the developing country toward developed countries almost. Secondly, Korea was a kind of aid recipient country, but now we are giving
a donor country.
Donor country.
Yes.
And thirdly, we are kind of, let's say, we have a cultural diversity. Our society is becoming rapidly internationalized. Therefore, we are in a very good position to do mediating role, harmonizer role with those kind of qualifications. So to make Seoul Summit successful with those kind of utilizing those kind of qualifications, we have to tackle courageously with the new issues, and of course we have to solve existing questions.
Well, actually, you partially answer my next question. Actually, I would like to raise this question to Dr. Song. Well, to host the successful G20 summit in November, we have maybe some challenges. What kind of the challenges we have to overcome for the success of the G20 summit meeting in November?
To make the G20 Seoul Summit to be successful, I agree with Professor Lee on the issues, agendas, and then there are some conflicting issues and agendas, and then especially in development issues, which is very important for developing countries and less developed countries, but it is not agreed so far. So we need to focus on these issues and to get more consensus on this issue. And that is the key issues for Seoul Summit to be successful. And then, but there are people who oppose G20 Summit in Korea, and they are organized and preparing for actions against this summit.
Really?
Okay, and this kind of behavior will not help anything or anyone. I think G20 Summit is for the people and for the global prosperity, not only for the rich or not only for the rich countries. So the actions and demonstrations opposing G20 Summit should be minimized for Korea to host a successful G20 Summit.
I see.
Well,
yes?
to get the successful summit, reiterating maybe, I think there are 3 points. The first one is it should be the very safe conference, because those all
many leaders
leaders are coming. The second point is it has to be a very effective, very productive things on the various issues I have told. And thirdly, it should be a kind of momentum to keep the continuity of G20 Summit. G20 Summit, as I already mentioned, is in a kind of very watershed point, or at least a crossroad. Economic crisis is kind of getting improved.
I see.
In that sense. So sense of urgency, which made G20 possible, is kind of waning at this moment. And on the other hand, it is very important observation at the Toronto Summit that we thought when G20 was launched, G7 era was over. But Toronto Summit reaffirmed that G8 will continue. G7 and G8 continue for a time being. So in that sense, we have to make G20 viable alternative for G8 or G7 or 8 in the mid to longer term perspectives. That means we have to make institutionalization of a G20 summit. So in that sense, we have to think about alternative of making secretariat, permanent secretariat for G20.
Well,
thereby it can contribute transparency, effectiveness, and all those things to a G20 summit. But most of all, I think national support, citizen support for the G20 summit is very important to lead a successful G20 summit. So thereby, I hope we can have a kind of soul momentum.
I see. Well,
where G20 can be a permanent steering committee for international economic governance.
Well, soul momentum, it sounds very interesting. Anyway, today with two experts, we have a discussion on the upcoming G20 summit. Thank you very much, Professor Lee and Dr. Song, for being with us today.
Thank you.
The G20 summit is a golden opportunity for Korea to make a real difference in the world and stand out as a new leader of the international decision-making process. And with the nation sparing no efforts to come up with innovative global solutions and get a global consensus, all signs are pointing in favor of its success. This has been Shin Sang-hyup for InFocus. Thank you for watching this program.